Нихуя въебу.
If there were nuclear strikes from Russia into Europe in the next year or two, as you said there may be, what countries would that include?
My choice would be Britain and Germany.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. You saw in the thumbnail, we are going to talk about World War III. If it's World War III or not, we're going to be discussing the conflict in Ukraine and, of course, the conflict in Iran. Iran. I'll have my first guest that I'm going to introduce to you, say the name correctly for me. This is Christopher Halali. He is an Iranian citizen. He also has spent time in America, and he is, I believe it's fair to say, a combat veteran. Is that correct, Chris?
That is correct. That is correct. And it's Iran, for those who are wondering.
Iran. And so next up we have Marcel. He is a Canadian who is living in Russia. He also has military experience.
Yeah.
Correct,
Hi.
Marcel?
Hi, everybody. My name is Marcel. I was serving in the Canadian Forces up until 2014, where then I voluntarily released. I was a captain in the healthcare administration. Didn't do any deployments per se, but definitely worked in the healthcare field and did lots of exercises and gained a little bit of military knowledge. Hopefully that helps share in this presentation, and certainly what I've been going through here in Bryansk.
Very good. Next up, we have Philip Hutchinson. He is a British man, and he, I believe, was an advisor to at least 3 UK prime ministers. Is that correct, Philip?
That's correct, yes. Yeah, Liz Truss, Boris Johnson, and Rishi Sunak.
Oh, very good, very good. But he is living in Russia, and he is a pro-Russian man, so don't get triggered by his resume, guys. And lastly, we have Konstantin. Konstantin is an author, and he travels back and forth between Russia and Germany and works closely with Alexander Dugin. Correct, Konstantin?
Well, it's basically correct. Yeah, I'm the founder and director of Multipolar Press, and we publish books, and we also have an online journal on which we publish like different articles by a variety of authors, including Alexander Dugin, every day in the English language.
Mm-hmm. Very good, very good. So everyone, we thought it would be good if we came together, people with citizenship from 5 different countries, and talk amongst each other about what's going on. I've got some questions for them, and we're going to be looking for your questions as well. Hopefully you've already put them in the chat. If not, do so as soon as you think of something, and we will get started in 1 minute. So that is footage of a trip I took actually with Marcel on the border in Russia, in Bryansk. And Marcel, the Canadian here, he just this week witnessed something, and I want him to share it with us now.
Okay, well, on March 10th, recently, just after the celebration of Women's Day, we experienced a rocket attack that was utilizing the British supplied Storm Shadow missiles in the city of Bryansk. Mm-hmm. And so the time of occurrence was approximately traffic hour when it was quite busy. So we were, as a family, just huddled around our little apartment, which happens to be about 700 meters from the impact zone. So needless to say, the first thing you hear in that kind of scenario is the alarms go off, the air alarm. as well
Mhm.
as the television will switch over and start giving a warning. And, it has happened quite a bit that we've had warnings of this kind of nature. So you're not always at the most heightened level of, awareness that this is going to happen. So suddenly you realize that this is real and it's happening, and you better get to cover it quickly before, you take the awards, the warning seriously, and you get to a safe area. So what happened was basically we had simultaneous inbound rockets coming. And I can tell you from my personal experience, I've seen lots of drones, heard lots of detonations, and those are obviously very scary, but nothing, compares to the rockets, because you actually hear them whistling in, and, time kind of shrinks in on you and everything slows down. It seems like time.
Phil, is that whistling what we heard in the intro when the guy's in his car? Is that what it sounds like?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like a high pitched whistle. It's very momentarily, it's a rocket. Like you just can easily distinguish that it's a rocket versus.
Let me play that again.
Нихуя въебу.
So is that the sound?
Yeah, so you start hearing those, and you don't exactly know where they're going to hit, whether they've been deflected or not. So you're in a panic state that catches everybody off guard. Everybody's been hearing these alerts a lot, and a lot of times they're just alerts and there's nothing that comes of it. But this time it certainly was a game changer in terms of Bryansk, because it impacted within the city. And they have been targeting a certain building close to where I live. And that building has been targeted several times by drones. So, we rushed into basically the bathroom here in my apartment, because it's got 4 concrete walls surrounding us. And I can tell you that we were definitely rattled. And because it's 6 back to back, you're experiencing this basically so close to you for the first time. It's very terrifying. And yeah, there's not much more to say, except that it's unfortunately that they picked the time where traffic hour was happening. So it was the most terror that they could inflict on the population, in terms of it instantly causing traffic jams and freaking everybody out, right? And my understanding is 6 or 7 people did perish in that attack. 37 to 42 injuries occurred, and the facility itself that they seem to be targeting, while they may have caught in portions of it, and those other areas of the strikes, my understanding is that facility has already been targeted so many times that, I don't know per hand, but strategically, it doesn't make sense that they would even been producing very much significantly there anymore. And because
You've
of
been under warning since then, right? Because this
yeah,
was 12 days ago, but you've been sending us messages that you are,
yeah,
hearing.
we've been under rocket alerts today as well. After that, we left for the country just to leave the area, not so much because of the threat of rockets, but because of it actually smoke in the air. It was quite smoky so we left the area to go to my cottage, and the traffic was horrendous, because obviously they had dropped one of those rockets fell in one of the central roundabouts that where the traffic hub of the city exists. And that day I've been through that roundabout 2 times already that day myself. And that's where I think a lot of the casualties occurred. Fragmentations that occur from a rocket strike, and yeah, terrifying. And
Well, I want to open it up to the group. Do you guys have any questions or comments based on what he just shared?
This area has been subjected to a lot of drone activity too. What have you seen? Have you seen an increase or a decrease of activity as the front moves? Because earlier on, as the front was closer, I'm sure there was more. But now, of course, the front keeps moving bit by bit, but is moving. Have you seen a decrease, an increase? Have you seen more long range versus short range? What's your understanding of that?
Like I previously shared with Joseph recently, that I witnessed some of those drones heading towards Putin's compound back in about, I think it's over a month ago. And recently, what I have realized, actually, especially in hindsight, when these incidents go by, is on Women's Day and holidays, it seems that they tend to increase the amount of drone activity attacks. And in hindsight, it seems pretty clear that what they were doing was trying to exhaust the defense capabilities of the Russian Federation, because they had launched about 250 drones that were mostly unsuccessful around that date. And then it was the middle of the week where suddenly this occurs at a very busy time. And perhaps that caught a little bit people unaware. But, you know, the trend is generally, it seems there's a terroristic nature behind it, because it's mostly about inflicting fear. And recently there's been an uptick in drone activity across the entire southern territory. Again, just last week after this incident, I think it was the first day at the cottage, I was out in the morning coming out to the dacha, and I could see a propeller drone flying not more than like half a kilometer over my head, heading towards Moscow. I don't know where they're targeting, because there probably is several target missions that they're probably trying to achieve. They seem pretty easy for me to see, and it seems like it wouldn't be that difficult to shoot out of the sky. I've done a bit of skeet shooting in the past. It seems like that would probably be sufficient to knock one of these things out of the sky. Most significantly, recently I released a video where I found on Telegram that the Bryansk Bars organization has gotten their hands on some pretty interesting kind of defensive drones, which fly at a very high speed. They are launched at these drones. They don't have a warhead, so they basically just target a drone with using artificial intelligence, and they seem pretty effective. They travel at about 250 kilometers an hour. And so if they're within 3 kilometers of these drones, they're able to use this new mechanism to launch a drone at a drone without a warhead. So it actually often impacts the warhead of the drone and detonates in the sky. So I've heard a lot of those type of explosions as too, and you can definitely mark the difference in sound from a rocket, you know, whether it be Flamingo or the British supported Storm Shadow.
Right. I see the questions coming in. Thanks, guys. I'll get to them when appropriate. And I also want to be sure that we turn our attention towards the other country. Chris, what's it called?
Iran.
All right. I want to make sure it's said correctly. But before we do, based on the thumbnail, I want to ask, and I'll start with Constantine because he is the intellectual of the group, the author. Constantine, do you think we have entered into World War III?
Well, this is difficult to say, of course, because we could already be in World War III and we just don't know it yet. And maybe, I don't know, a couple of decades from now, or even a couple of years from now, in hindsight, people will say that World War III already started in 2022, right? Like the early stages, maybe, right? Maybe we're not in World War III. It's very difficult to say because it also depends on how you define a world war. Like, in my opinion, we are probably moving very fast towards World War III simply because, by definition, there are a lot of conflicts in different parts of the world, and a lot of them are proxy wars between nuclear superpowers. I mean, you have the proxy war in Ukraine, which is basically between the Russian Federation and the United States. Now you have the war in Iran, which is also a kind of proxy war because you have the United States and Israel attacking Iran. But Iran is, of course, tacitly supported by the Russian Federation and China, and they have a vested interest that Iran comes out victorious in this conflict. But as you can see, all of these conflicts are interconnected. It is basically the United States trying to fight the emergence of the multipolar world. And we can see that the United States is like a late-stage Roman Empire. It is in the grip of imperial overstretch. It is trying to manage too many theaters in too many parts of the globe. And I think it does not have the necessary resources nor the necessary power to come out victorious, especially when it comes to Iran. I think we can already see that the United States, and especially Trump, is desperately trying to find an off-ramp while saving face, meaning they want to present it as a victory. And they want to walk away, but pretend that they won. But I don't think Iran's going to go with it. And I don't think that off-ramp is possible anymore, because Trump has clearly lost his mind. I mean, that's what it seems like to me. I mean, in a clinical sense, because he says contradictory statements every single day. Like one day he says, we won, we destroyed all the military capabilities of the Iranian quote-unquote regime, we destroyed their navy, we destroyed the air force, and the next day, like one of the American jets is shot down. So how does that work? And then he says, like, we don't need anybody, we can deal with the Strait of Hormuz by ourselves. The next day he's begging the Europeans to help him, even China, to help him out of all countries. It's just utterly bizarre. And now he gave like Iran the ultimatum, 48 hours. So, I mean, open the Strait of Hormuz, or we will target power centers in Iran. And Iran, of course, said that the Strait of Hormuz is already open. Yes, it's just regulated by Iran. And ships of certain nations are allowed passage through the strait, just not enemy ships, which makes perfect sense, obviously. So I don't know, I think this conflict, in my opinion, will drag on for quite a long time. I mean, that's what it seems like. And I think in Ukraine, the conflict is also not close to finishing, in my opinion. And I think simply because in all these conflicts, you have the major powers involved, especially the United States, and the emerging poles in the multipolar world, meaning China and Russia, and also to some extent India. I think it could be classified as a world war.
What do the rest of you guys think?
Well, I definitely feeling it here that I have a blog that I've called the trajectory for that reason, is that since 2022, we've seen a steady trajectory in the wrong direction. And I view war as usually a strategic failure of politicians. And so we see a lot of strategic errors that are going on right now, which are definitely leading towards World War III, if we're not already in it.
It seems like if we're transitioning from multipolar, from unipolar to multipolar, it may be unavoidable. Philip, what were you going to say?
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, it's all about reinforcement, really, of all the different conflicts going on around the world. I mean, we'd never, go into a meeting, or COBRA meeting, or whoever's around the table and say, look, there's now a world war, or there could be a world war. In fact, classifying something as a world war tends to happen after the conflicts have actually happened, rather than at the time. So what even is a world war? It's kind of what we kind of want to make of it, really. But ultimately it's all about how each individual conflict goes, and whether they do all start sort of reinforcing each other and getting backed up by the likes of NATO and Russia and China to a certain extent as well.
Right.
I would argue, I mean, first and foremost, everyone I think is accurate in saying that we need to first understand what a definition of a world war is. What's the classification for a world war? And for those of us who studied, military science and political philosophy, history, things like that, what you end up finding out is that some scholars would call the Cold War World War III. So some people are actually saying we're in the midst of World War IV, actually. Because it depends on it. A World War III doesn't necessarily have to use nuclear weapons, even though that was part of the definition during the Cold War period that the next world war will be a nuclear one and it will be the last of them, right? And then they would say classically World War IV will be sticks and stones and, caveman style. But really what you can say is that we are in a period, and I want to think in larger historical epochs, in like the longue durée type of history, which is that we are now in a similar way, like in the European wars, especially the much longer ones that went decades, if not a century. We are in a process of global transformation that is leading to conflicts all over the world simultaneously and in similar time frames. And this is part of the reshaping of the world order. So if you're talking, as you said, unipolar to multipolar, whatever that means, however we want to think about it, and I don't want to be necessarily utopian because everybody's waiting for BRICS to come and save the day. And I don't think it's that. I think it's much more complex. And there's it's not the same ideologically as the Cold War period. It's a much more open and expansive time ideologically. And that means that there's a lot of open room, but also a lot of conflict zones because a lot of different interests competing with one another. So I want to say that we are certainly in a war, we're certainly in a period of war around the world that is encompassing all major powers, whether it be directly on the battlefield, like Russia in Ukraine, those that support the Ukrainian regime, like the entire Western alliance, all of NATO, US, EU, NATO. In Iran, you have, as Konstantin set up so nicely, you have also throughout Africa, you also have France, the US, other major countries fighting for a domain. You have the Sahel countries, Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger breaking out. You have Latin America. We just had a president, a legitimate sovereign head of state, basically kidnapped at gunpoint and brought with his wife to the US to some dungeon with 100 or so people killed, and Venezuela completely captured as a state. So we're in a period of profound global conflict. Maybe it's not at the level of World War II when we're seeing 30 plus, 40 plus, 50 plus, 60 plus million killed. But we are seeing tremendous devastation and chaos in the global system. And even you might say that the world system is anarchic now. So I think that certainly plays into the fact that, yes, we are in a war on a worldwide scale now. Whether it'll be classified as a world war, I'm not quite sure. But everybody here understands that whether it be in the Eastern Europe domain, whether it be in the Middle East, whether it be in Africa, Latin America, and even in the Pacific, the Far East with China and Taiwan and what's going on there on the Korean Peninsula, there's a lot of things happening now.
Right. Well, Chris, you're the Iranian in the bunch, so the next question I wanted you to lead off with. Do you think that Iranians are now unified because of what happened? And do you think they might feel like they have nothing left to lose?
Listen, Iran is a civilization state. Konstantin and I can go on and on about what that means and a sort of civilizational approach to history. But the main thing is that Iran is unique. It's not like Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, which have modern borders and their states are byproducts of the colonial period, especially
like
the past. Iran, as its borders are defined, is basically like this for millennia at this point. Back and forth, of course, expansion, contraction, but these borders define Iran. And so Iranians are very patriotic. Of course, the most Iranians are Muslim. Some Iranians are Christian. Some Iranians are Jewish. Some Iranians are Zoroastrian. Others are non-religious. So I think that it's important to understand that the Islamic Republic of Iran, which has been around for 47 years, emerged through a revolution, a popular revolution. That popular revolution has made a big impact on the country. Now, listen, this country has been under brutal sanctions from the beginning. It also had an 8-year war imposed on it from neighboring Iraq, supported by the entire West and also by some other Eastern countries as well, or global South countries, you could say. And that experience transformed Iran as well. And throughout this process, we've seen that Iran as a state has been so resilient to various attempts to destroy it. And it's not only to destroy Iran for Iran's sake or for the liberation of the people of Iran. It is also because Iran, as I say so often, if you look geographically, Iran is the keystone in the Arch of Eurasia. So in the Southern Passage, historically, for the Silk Road, for so many of the transfer of knowledge, of goods throughout history. It has gone through the Iranian state. It has gone through the Iranian territory. So if you didn't want to go the northern route, which was Central Asia into present-day Russia, and go that way to Europe, most of them went directly through Iran and would hit the Eastern Mediterranean, Constantinople. That was the way, or go south to the Arabian Peninsula and then maybe cross over into Egypt. So Iran was the likely place. That's why Iran is such a beautiful and mosaic type of society with so many cultures and traditions and customs because of that, because of all the peoples that have come through. So with that, Iran is strategic in Eurasia as a point of control. So I think that it also affects China and Belt and Road and everything that it's trying to do. And also Russia as well, because if you take Iran, you have the historical sphere of influence of the Russian Empire, Soviet Union, Central Asia, and the Caucasus, and you have the Caspian Sea direct to Russia. So this is exactly what Hitler was hoping for, to get Baku. That was the whole reason for Stalingrad, was for Hitler to continue to the Caucasus and to get Baku, because it's oil rich. So to get Iran is a prize. Whoever gets Iran can project tremendous power in Eurasia. So you asked the question about what do Iranians feel? Iranians are very united, especially in Iran. Outside, the situation is a bit more complex. Many Iranians in the diaspora support some of the opposition, including the son of the former Shah, Reza Pahlavi, who lives in the US, and some support Maryam Rajavi of the Mujahideen Khalq, the People's Mujahideen of Iran, which is a terrorist organization based in Albania. The US government supports different factions of the US government, and Israeli government support different sides of this opposition. Rudy Giuliani, John Bolton, Pompeo, they support the Mujahideen Khalq. They support the People's Mujahideen. Others support Reza Pahlavi, especially the Israelis. So I think that some of the diaspora, at least we could say half, if not a little bit more than half, support the opposition. But within Iran, people are united, because this isn't only an attack on the Islamic Republic. This is an attack on Iran itself as a country. And because of its nature as a proud nation, even people who are opposed to the government say, okay, they're not only attacking the government, they're attacking and killing civilians. They're killing schoolgirls. They're attacking our cultural heritage. They're destroying and creating chaos in Golistan Palace, in Esfahan, in our beautiful sites. They're creating ecological damage by destroying these oil refineries and depots and storage tanks that's literally raining oil and sulfuric acid and nitric acid on people and burning their skin and creating long-term health effects and poisoning the water. So of course people are going to say, okay, maybe I don't like the government. Maybe the government has failed in its policies. Maybe we have a bad economy because of the sanctions and also government policies, but we're going to stand united to fight against this aggressor, because Iranians have fought against many aggressors. Iranians have a long historical memory. We must always think that the famous Gore Vidal used to say that the United States is one of amnesia. That's the real USA, United States of amnesia. But the truth is that Iran has a long perspective of history, just like Russians do, just like Chinese do, just like other, especially civilization states do. So they say, okay, we had the Mongols with Genghis and Hulagu Khan. We had the Ottoman Wars. We had the wars with the Russian Empire. We had, of course, 1953 with Mossadegh and being overthrown by joint CIA MI6 operation. And we had a revolution. So we know what happens when this happens. We had war with Iraq. We had war with Afghanistan and Iraq as neighbors with America involved. So they understand. So there's a big unified presence. And to be honest, Iran has already won by lasting this long, by showing the world that they are capable of resisting the biggest empire in the world, in world's history, really, in terms of military power, and its satellite state, which is also a nuclear power. Iran is taking on two nuclear powers, two nuclear states, and grinding them now. And literally, this little Strait of Hormuz, they're choking the entire global economy and showing how fragile the US and the West is. And that's why Trump and everybody has to do damage control every day. Oh, actually, we're going to end the conflict maybe next week. And so the prices, dip. And then actually they realize, no, we're sending ground troops, and the prices go up. And they say something else and the prices dip. But that's to show you how powerful a country that has been under sanctions, that has been under the worst conditions, can resist. And that's been a source of inspiration for many. In fact, there are so many videos even on Russian social media of people cheering and praising Iran, because for them, Iran represents what a lot of people want, which is get the boot off of our neck. Leave us alone. Let other countries just be free. Why you don't like us? Okay, no problem. Be like the Chinese. Do business. You come, you do business, win-win, and then you go home. But why come and start bombing us and destroying us and trying to create chaos? So I think definitely, I think that Iran's unified now. Iran is in a very powerful position. And regardless of what happens, Iran will come out on top from the situation. There's no doubt about it. Just like the US lost in Vietnam, in Afghanistan, in Iraq. And those were people, far less populations, far less state control and structures, not regular armies. We saw in Afghanistan basically just people, ex-Mujahideen, Taliban style, sandals, Kalashnikovs, some anti-aircraft, few missiles, and they defeated the US after 20 years. The Taliban's in power now. The Taliban's been recognized as the government by countries, including Russia. So we should not give too much credit that the US can do much, because really, for many scholars, the US has not won a war since World War II.
Yeah, it's crazy. This couldn't be going according to their plan, right? The US and Israel. I mean, to see images of Israel and to hear that Netanyahu might not be, around anymore. I'm like, what were they thinking? I mean, because I've seen video clips of Israel, and I was going to have it ready, but I didn't get it in time. And you look at the footage, and it looks like in some places you could be, if it was unlabeled, you could be looking at the Russia-Ukraine border, you know. So I don't know what they were thinking. It's certainly not going according to plan. I open the floor. What do you guys think? You have anything you want to add to this?
I actually would like to hit on a point that and a word that Christopher mentioned. He mentioned the word mosaic, and I've been doing some research into just how resilient the Iranian government will be. And it really has a key with their strategy of how they employ the government. It's a mosaic of regions and, assigning up to 3 delegates and decentralized planning that's pre-approved. And so when this kicked off, it was like very clear to me that this may be a point in time where this is a very, probably the most epic strategic blunder the United States will have ever done, especially vis-a-vis allowing and following the lead of Israel, who initiated the first strikes. And it's not the first time. I mean, there was attacks on diplomatic missions in Damascus, and as well as assassination attempts while diplomatic processes were in place. And these are strategic blunders from a diplomatic perspective. I don't think that a country can recover from, because nobody is going to trust negotiating anything with the United States or Israel diplomatically. And so the time of diplomacy is done, in my opinion. A huge strategic blunder is done. You have country of Iran, which is very old and historic in terms of culture, regions, and it has been witnessing this simple-minded military aggression from the Western world for so long that it devised a very formidable posture and defense to drag out any kind of conflict into the region, which will be like a huge burden on the most central part of Western civilization, which is the petrodollar. And if the Strait of Hormuz is influenced and stopped from economic activity, that means the petrodollar is not being used. That means resources are not coming into the region. And that will be a huge blunder in the long term for the American Western powers. And they're all sort of fumbling around. And Israel took the lead, and Trump followed through, which was counter to anything he had promised.
If I can just plug quickly, Marcel's absolutely right. If you're interested to research what's called the decentralized mosaic defense, I did a video on my channel about it for about an hour. You can watch it. But the Iranians, people are like, oh, Iranians, a bunch of brown people in huts. Wrong. Iranians are one of the most educated in the region, one of the most educated populations in the world. You've seen that all of their leaders have PhDs or master's degrees, have done dissertations on Kant, political philosophy, political science, management, and business. And what did the Iranians do over the past 4 decades? They've been reading Mao, Che Guevara. They've been looking at the partisan activity in the Great Patriotic War. They've been reading the studies from Vietnam, from Africa, in Algeria, in Angola, in all of these liberation struggles, and they have been planning accordingly. And they said exactly, Marcel's right, 4 deep, a leader and others following them. So there can be 4 deep. In case 3 are gone, you still have a replacement. So they are fully prepared for everyone to die at the top. We're ready to go.
There's regional breakdown autonomy. So
yes, and absolutely, it's decentralized. Everyone has, all local commanders have full control so long as they are following the line of the revolution and the government. No problem. Regional commanders will carry out their operations even if there's no centralized command. That's the beauty and the depth of the resistance now that the U.S. and Israel are encountering.
Yeah, I just wanted to address something that Marcel mentioned, because he said, like, who's going to trust the U.S. anymore? Well, nobody, obviously, but I think the trust had eroded a long time before. Like, even during Trump's first term, he basically ripped up the agreement that Obama made with Iran. And that already showed the world that you cannot make agreements with the United States, because the United States, and that's according to Sergei Lavrov, Russia's foreign minister, he said that the United States is basically agreement incapable. And that is because of the bipolar, and I mean this in a clinical sense, nature of the political system in the United States. Because you have one administration which lasts 4 years, and then there's no continuity because that administration might disappear and the opposing political party might gain power. And they completely ignore anything in terms of agreement that the previous administration honored. Trump himself, like going back to Ukraine, he calls the conflict in Ukraine, he calls it Biden's war. It's not my war, it's Biden's war. But what does it mean? I mean, it's America's war. It's not just tied to one administration. The entire American political system and the establishment is involved in this conflict, which already started in 2014, so several administrations ago. And each administration has participated. But this is the system in the United States. Like, one administration pretends that it's basically a completely new government, a completely new structure that has absolutely nothing to do with its predecessors. Completely absurd. So how can any country in the world trust the United States? Like, for example, when Trump says he wants to make a deal with North Korea, like, how can the North Koreans agree to nuclear disarmament if one administration makes certain promises, is if they full well know that the next administration might not honor it, and there's precedent for this. And it's the same with the sanctions regime, that not only the United States, but also the European Union imposed on Russia. Yes, I mean, the whole world can see it, especially the global South. Actually, I prefer the term global majority. I mean, they can see what the West is doing there, and they're saying to themselves, obviously, it's like, why should we trust the West with our assets, our finances, our gold, our money? It's not possible, because if there's some kind of political disagreement, they will just steal our stuff, because that's what the West is doing right now. It's basically some mafia syndicate, the whole Western system. And it is exposing itself every day more and more. And I think a lot of people, especially now with this whole Iran debacle, are waking up now. And the West is basically the emperor with no clothes, right? And everybody can see what is going on, especially also with the release of the Epstein files. I mean, and that's what everybody calls the West now. They call it the Epstein system, the Epstein syndicate, because the Epstein class, right? I mean, because it is basically the elite of the West against the rest of the world, including the people of the West, the average person in the West who does not benefit from any of these conflicts. I mean, I just read today, like, I don't know, over 22, 23 billion dollars were already wasted by the United States now on this Iran conflict in like 3 weeks, and possibly more because other costs are not accounted for. But how does that benefit like average people in the Midwest in the United States? Obviously, it doesn't benefit them. And then, of course, people always say, well, we can't have free healthcare because, it's socialism, it's bad, But we can waste all this money on wars that literally only a tiny, tiny fraction of certain countries benefit from. And I think it is this system that is exposed to the hilt right now, and it is sort of starting its descent into collapse, basically. And I think if this, and as Chris said, and I think Chris, of course, is absolutely right, Iran has already won because they have persevered and they have shown perseverance. And I think they will show it even more. I mean, it would be interesting to see the day after tomorrow if Trump will follow through with this deranged threat of bombing the power stations in Iran, and if Iran will retaliate in return and really close the Strait of Hormuz and also target American energy assets in the region. So, I mean, very, very interesting times ahead. Scary, but also optimistic because we can see that the unipolar order is collapsing in real time in front of our eyes. And an empire which is dying, like the Western Empire is right now, is always the most dangerous one because it's the most dangerous phase because it is desperate to cling on to its hegemony. But at the same time, it also realizes that the same hegemony is already slipping away faster and faster every day.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Thanks for sharing that. And guys, if you don't know Constantine, except that he's an author and a German, like I introduced him, he went to university in New Orleans and he participated in Civil War reenactments and spent several years in the U.S. So this is not someone who's looking for an opportunity to hate on the U.S. He has an affinity.
No, I don't hate the U.S. at all. I love the U.S. and I tell people that all the time. I don't hate America. I think America is wonderful. I'm a big fan of American culture. I mean, real American culture, American literature, like Edgar Allan Poe, H.P. Lovecraft, William Faulkner, all that stuff. Like real good American cinema. Massive fan. I've traveled extensively in the United States, and I think a lot of people, I mean, on our side, on sort of on the side of multipolarity, they're also on the side of the American people because the American people is also a victim of this Epstein class, and this has to be pointed out over and over again that we are actually not anti-American at all. We are actually the only ones who are authentically pro-American, I would say.
Iranians are saying it too. Constantine's absolutely right. Even Iranians like Arakchi is saying this war has been thrust upon American people. American people didn't vote for this war. They voted for no more wars. They voted for no endless wars, no more regime change. That's what Trump said. That's what Tulsi said. That's what everybody was saying. And so that's what they wanted. And he's saying, we don't hate the American people. We didn't attack you. We didn't do anything against you. You came to us. We didn't do anything to you.
I would agree. And it's not in the strategic interest of Russia to see America collapsed either.
Nobody wants to see
America collapse because it would be horrific world if the entire American system was to collapse into some kind of mad chaos. I don't know what the consequences would be, but it wouldn't be good for the world at all.
Listen, the main thing is that the U.S. is a country, whether people like it or not. If it's the more important thing is if it's going to be a constructive partner in development, in prosperity, in all the human indicators and factors that make life good. If it's going to be a force for peace, but instead it's a force for war and destruction. That's what people don't like.
It's like hijacked by an elite core of power. And of course, my fear is, and understanding the elite power structure is that they're desperate, their institutions are failing, and when they are failing, they're going to lash out in very irrational ways. And that's what we're experiencing right now. The irrational failure of like a system that doesn't have enough imagination to enter into a future where it's more equitable for all countries to actually have a bit of sovereignty and respect, rather than trying to conglomerize everything under a technology-based oligarchy that is sort of taking shape.
Right. Well, let me bring Philip back into the conversation here. Philip, because of your proximity to the prime ministers, what is your opinion of the Gulf states? Are they going to try to stay neutral? Are they going to take sides? Which side? What do you think is
They're in a
going to
very,
happen?
very difficult spot, especially places like Dubai. You know, historically, for example, the UAE, it's a place that has a huge sense of security, especially for people like, well, British citizens flocking into the UAE. In the last few weeks, we've seen hundreds of billions of dollars wiped off. The stock market, property. I've got a lot of friends out in Dubai, and looking at the state of real estate there, for example, people that are literally negative equity now because pretty much overnight it's just wiped all of this money off. Now, from a UK perspective, the Prime Minister is focusing, I'm pretty sure right now, on his legacy. He's looking back and having a bit of deja vu from 2003, and he's thinking, do I want to be known as the kind of Tony Blair 2.0? So all of these things, he's going to be looking at. He's going to be focusing mostly on the stability of energy markets and maritime security, and the fact that there's so many, tens of thousands, if not 100,000 plus, of British citizens, in that part of the world. And then from the UAE's perspective, for example, and other sort of Gulf states, what have they got? They've got oil, but the oil is drying up, and they've got tourism and people traveling there. This has caused obviously a huge nightmare for everyone in that area, because everyone's leaving, everyone's worried, and their hands might be tied at some point, because look how many billions of dollars the UAE has invested in the US, is, well, vice versa, really, with AI and data centers and technology, and all the rest of it. So, I think as a country, we're focusing very much on the UAE, but as a whole, they probably want to remain neutral. But how long are they going to be able to remain neutral? In the same sense that right now, the UK is saying very much that they're not involved. Their bases can only be used for defensive purposes. He didn't really have a choice. The US kind of, stated that they have to, and he sort of reluctantly agreed. But what else could he say? But how long can he remain in that situation when potentially, tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of British lives are at risk? And how long is it going to be before he weighs in on things and aligns himself a bit more with the Trump administration and others?
Right. Interesting. What do you guys think?
I just want to say, with the direction things are going, and as we talked about power, I think there's a very high probability that some nefarious actors could be false flag attacked in order to gain popular support to have boots on the ground go in Iran. And I really think that that's a factor that we have to be spreading the message that we shouldn't be allowing people to fall for this trap of, a false flag attack to occur in the United States, possibly motivated by particular nations that it's in their interest for this conflict to expand and push popularity to have, the populations increase their support to putting boots on the ground. And I think that's a very high probability, and it's gaining momentum all the time. And there's actually a couple nations in this planet that I think are looking to false flag attacks to bolster their control over their populations, to increase maybe the political maneuvers to have conscription start occurring. And you could see a lot of exercises within the NATO alliance, especially in the Baltic regions, where they're creating, part-time stay camps, or they're expanding military zones where, they can have people who are, counter to the military that are going on. And that has been encroaching the Western world. Many of the countries like Canada and Australia, you could see in the UK, it's all focused around removing people's freedoms of expression. And so we're in a high state of watchfulness in order to counteract any kind of false flag attacks that are going to be falsely used to bolster the populations politically. We have to be aware of that as a reality right now.
It's interesting what you said, Philip. What choice do they have as far as the U.S. requests of the UK? And it just made me think, well, yeah, I guess that makes sense, because if they have spent the last 80 years, tooling their entire country to be basically an assistant to the U.S. in some ways, then they really, they may be very, very limited in what their answers can be, unless they're going to decide to assist a different country.
Well, that's it. Historically, they've been puppets of the US, and very much, back in 2003 when Tony Blair received that call from George Bush, he was very much of the mindset, look, yes, of course, George, whatever goes, whatever you say, we're behind you 100%. Now he's probably having second thoughts about, right, when I receive that call from Donald Trump, what do I say? Knowing from historic events, how things went and the reasons that we went into Iraq before, and what we know now, that there wasn't actually weapons of mass destruction, which was the whole point of going into Iraq in the first place. So I think he's treading a bit more carefully, but it just it's how much more pressure is he going to get, both from the US administration and his own advisors, his team around him, his ministers. It could push him sort of over that level, and they could very much get more involved, and that will obviously cause a huge escalation if the US start acting in that way as well, because letting the US use some of their bases is one thing, and it's still showing that they are involved in this war. Let's not say they're not involved. Yes, they are involved purely by assisting the US with use of their military bases. But I think I personally think it could escalate to the point where they're getting more and more involved. I think that's the way it is going to go, and I think his hands are going to be tied eventually. If things
interject a little bit here, I just would like to bring up a concept where I think the American strategy here is very deceptive, and they're on a pathway of using a strategy called strategic sequencing. And I also think that this narrative of political gamesmanship between the alliance members is a lot for show at this point, especially after so many years of the conflict going on in Ukraine. I think this is all for show. I think it's been planned. And what I do think is there's been a partitioning of regional responsibilities that has been divvied in secret amongst them, where the British and the French are going to be bolstering the Ukrainian Russia areas up into Romania. And I think that's why you don't have participation of the British. We're right now being advertised to go to the Middle East, because that's going to be the Americans' responsibility right now. And they are playing a game right now politically. I don't believe any of this gamesmanship you see politically. I absolutely see that as a strategic misinformation campaign. And it's being well played. And if anything, Trump is actually playing a game where he's going around disrupting the legacy powers, whether it be from Japan and everything, because he's basically telling everybody you better get your militaries on board and ready, and you'll be given an area of responsibility because we're doing this. And that's what I think is happening. America's on a path of strategic sequencing. They've been started this a long time ago. They were pulling out of Ukraine on purpose to make sure that the Europeans step into the responsibility of holding the line there. And they went into Venezuela to secure oil assets, and they're moving from one to another. And you see that Trump has no problem with upsetting leaders from every nation. And what he's basically doing is he's putting a fire under them so that they bolster resources, so that they could march this sequencing across the planet towards China. And we're talking about a round table of World War III, and you have to have China in this equation in the end of the conversation. It's necessary.
That is fascinating and scary. Philip, what do you think about what he just said? Because you have been higher up the food chain than the rest of us as far as with the UK. Did you get this sense at all, or no?
Yeah, no, I do. And you're completely right in what you're saying. I mean, Trump is sort of trying to bully his way around the world to get what he wants for the US and the interests of the US. Nothing more to say on that, really.
Did you feel though, Philip, when you're in these meetings that you guys had some autonomy, you had some flexibility to decide, or was it all just part of the script?
Absolutely not. We always had the line of whatever the US wants, they're gonna get, and we could be in a meeting with the Prime Minister, the Defense Secretary, the Home Secretary, the Foreign Secretary, whoever, and we could have an opinion on something, but we knew whatever happened, it was gonna be the decision of the US administration. Like literally 100% of the time, we knew that was exactly what was going to happen, to the point where it was almost pointless us trying to suggest a different strategy, a different approach, present different advice to different ministers, because we knew how it was going to go, and we knew that at the time, whatever decision had been made was going to go ahead. There wasn't any sort of way around that. The way you could try and go around that was speak to advisors on the US side and see if there's any influence that some of those advisors had with their bosses and the administration to try and kind of work it that way. But ultimately, there was no, so, and like I say, now I think Keir Starmer is trying to be a bit smarter about the situation and not directly follow what the US is saying. I think if 2003 didn't happen, maybe there'd be sort of a different outlook on this. But he's in trouble as it is. He's in big trouble as it is. He's probably the worst rated prime minister to date. Right now, if there was an election, he wouldn't win. And when it comes to politics, by the way, it isn't about, is this right? Is this wrong? It's about, is that decision going to get me through the next election? How is that going to look to the electorate and to our people? Because of course you need to think about consequences and how are those decisions going to affect the world, but 99% of the time it is overridden by what stage are we in the election cycle? If I make that decision now, is it going to affect things 4 years down the line, or are we at a point where we're at the halfway mark or nearer the end of the cycle? And depending on when you make a decision can make the next election pretty much decided before it's happened.
Mm-hmm. And we got a donation, it looks like, from one of your people, Philip. And listening to you share, both of you guys share, it just made me think, so the film Love Actually is not the truth. It's not for real. Hugh Grant really couldn't stamp to the US president, right?
Well, there's an invisible hand that's creating Western policy, obviously, and they're all having to follow the script.
So, Marcel, as far as energy transport, what are the pluses and minuses if we were to look towards Turkey and Azerbaijan? Because you seem like you have studied this a lot.
Well, I mean, as of recently, the energy corridor between Turkey and Azerbaijan is going to start experiencing challenges, whether it be attacks from drones, from different
Hmm.
threats, whether it be Ukraine, uh, people who are maybe insurgents, terrorists looking to undermine energy security within the region, and
Hmm.
look at energy corridors of natural gas since 2022. They've trying to remove their dependence on gas coming from Russia. And the European Union is, of course, using lots of sanctions in that. And this conflict with Iran is going to exacerbate it. There's been attacks that have come from within Iran, striking airports in Azerbaijan, which are causing, issues with regards to energy infrastructure that is planned and that is currently existing. They have big plans to move energy from that region through Turkey towards Europe. That's a big plan about circumventing Russian energy. There's been a big movement towards LNG, and if you do a deep dive in LNG, you realize that they've created a lot of infrastructure to receive LNG within the European Union, and it's a very tricky energy source because it's not that simple. I mean, you have to create the infrastructure, you have to create the environment to turn it into a liquid, you have to transport it, you have to warm it back up, put it back into the pipelines amongst the receiving nations. The price fluctuations can occur drastically as COVID dropped the demand big time through these energy corridors. And as well, you had all these boats within the Gulf area that were pinned down during COVID. They weren't moving because there was no demand. And so it's a volatile and it's a very unique, it's like they've got all their eggs in one basket. In all this conflict, we see there's winners and losers. And I think most people agree, from all the pundits I've ever listened to, is that the European Union is one of the biggest losers in all this from an energy perspective.
Yeah. So what do you guys think? You have anything you want to add to that as far as the energy moving?
The first and foremost, the energy is a very big aspect of this entire conflict, this entire war. And one thing that is so important to understand is that we have to look at the Caucasus, especially Azerbaijan, as a key country here, because Azerbaijan supplies Israel with a lot of its oil. Upwards of, I think, 15 to 25%, somewhere in that vicinity, of Israel's oil comes from Azerbaijan through the pipeline that goes from Azerbaijan through Turkey into the Eastern Mediterranean, and then Israelis pick it up there. So that pipeline is also on the target list as well. Of course, Iranians don't want to go to that level because they don't want to infringe on Azerbaijan and Turkey. They see them as neighbors and they want to maintain good relations. But they continuously say, if you remain party to this war, like if this war continues and you are materially benefiting the enemy, the aggressor who's fighting against us, then the pipeline becomes a target, right? So that should be, and that was part of the reason why the drones, Iran said that the drones weren't from them. And I have reason to believe that they weren't, but there's a lot of false flags happening here because they want to drag in Turkey and Azerbaijan into this. But also because Azerbaijan used to belong to Iran during the Safavid and Qajar dynasties, and even before. It was lost during the war between the Qajar dynasty and the Russian Empire. And then most Azeris live in Iran. They don't live in Azerbaijan. So that means that Azerbaijan has irredentist claims. It claims territory that belongs to Iran as part of its own country in the ultra-nationalist discourse. So they would be seen as perfect for sectarian breakup and sort of balkanization. That remains an important aspect. Also, it's important to note not only the Strait of Hormuz, but the Eastern Mediterranean is critical here. And that's why you've seen the situation. You can combine the energy situation of Lebanon and Gaza, because Gaza's exclusive economic zone, if it were to be a separate state, which, all intents and purposes should be under international law, but Israel, of course, does not recognize it and controls its waters. Its waters contain oil underneath. And Lebanon, if you look at their economic exclusive zone. So part of these greater conflicts are also for the control of energy resources by Israel in their surrounding domain. So we have to understand it's also for the growing alliance between Greece, Cyprus, and Israel. Also the economic zone agreement between Greece, Turkey, Cyprus, Israel, Egypt, Libya, all amongst each other and going in different directions. So the Eastern Mediterranean is critical here. You have the Persian Gulf, the Caspian and Caucasus region, and the Eastern Mediterranean as three parts of this dance that you're seeing diplomatically and now, of course, on the battlefield. And I think that when you have that in mind, you'll understand a lot more of the deeper situations and reverberations of what's actually going on. Sure, Greater Israel is nice theologically and for the fucking fanatics. Sorry, for the fanatics, the religious fanatics that are out there, wanting a Greater Israel, the Third Temple, the Red Heifer, whatever they want. But actually, at the structural level, at the economic level, if we look at this from a political economic standpoint, the greater territory also leads to greater oil resources, especially in a resource-rich area. So, of course, why not take south of the Litani River in Lebanon? Because when you take that territory, you also have the exclusive economic zone in the shelf, the continental shelf next door, so you can do oil exploration, which is exactly what Israel has been asking for decades with Lebanon. So why not take it by force now? You're seeing the largest ethnic cleansing happening in south of Lebanon. My friend and brother Steve Sweeney and Ali Rida, they're the RT journalists that were just bombed. I just spoke to them last night, right? And I spoke to Ali the night before they were bombed. All of that is to silence the truth of what's going on in Lebanon too. So this isn't only a war on Iran. This is a war that's reaching Lebanon, Iraq, soon to be Yemen. I mean, this is catching the whole region on fire and could drag in other regional powers.
So they are certain that they were attacked on purpose, those two guys. And for people that are skeptical, is there any way to let them know this is for sure a target? Like, I guess Israel has the telemetry to be able to do that, and they knew where they were, and they decided to try to silence them. Is that the idea?
Well, Israel has killed 200 journalists in Gaza, targeted strikes, not random. Listen, Israel at the same time, this is the case of the Schrodinger, Israeli intelligence cat. Sometimes it's so precise, it can do a complex operation like the beepers and blow up all of Hezbollah operatives in one go, and they know where somebody's sitting in a hotel room in Iran. But randomly in south of Lebanon, when they have drones and airplanes and assets on this all over, they have human assets, they have drones, they have airplanes, they have satellites. They don't know that the Russian team is there. They just have to look. They can see, and plus they're in contact with the locals on the ground who are helping them. They knew about this, of course. They've targeted journalists. They've targeted them in the West Bank. They killed Shireen Abu Akleh, who was a U.S. citizen. They killed her and still no accountability for that. Imagine they killed a dual citizen of the United States, a reporter, or a very, very profound and well-respected and award-winning journalist. Nothing. They killed journalists in Gaza. They killed journalists in Lebanon now. So it's just a fact. It's a reality. And you know what? We should understand. You remember Julian Assange? One of the reasons that Julian Assange was in the situation he was the release of the tape with Manning. I'm trying to remember. Chelsea Manning, thank you. With that tape of the killing of the journalists in Iraq from the Apache helicopters, remember? Light them up. And you saw that entire video, that 12-minute sequence. So targeting of journalists happens, even though it's illegal under international law. It's illegal under the laws of armed conflict. Marcel and I know, having been military people in the past, especially we both were officers. This is day one when you're learning about military. You learn. You don't target medics. You don't target people who have a parachute who are coming down unless they're shooting at you. You don't target journalists. You don't target religious, sites of historical significance are not to be targeted. Hospitals are not to be targeted. But on the other side, they do it because who's going to hold them accountable? International law is only as powerful if you can, as the person who can hold someone responsible for violating it. So if nobody can hold you responsible for violating it, who cares? Do what you want. That's how they operate.
Like in my research, LNG and gas and energy, there's a saying here that there's a super expansion cycle, and they were in the way of the super expansion cycle.
There you go.
Interesting. Well, Chris, I liked how you explained the connection between Azerbaijan and Iran. So just so I understand correctly, so historically that border has been flexible to a point where the genetic peoples have mixed back and forth in that area. Is that correct? Is that how a layman could understand it?
There's no doubt that the people are very connected. I mean, you look at an Armenian, you look at a Turk, you look at an Iranian and a Kurd, and sometimes you can't tell the difference because we're blended people. I mean, it's the Caucasus, it's that whole region, Fertile Crescent into the Caucasus. Everybody, you even look at genetics. I mean, if you look at my DNA, I've done my DNA analysis on 2 different platforms. The map is all that region, you know? I mean, it's just a reality.
Very good.
Come and go. Of course, certain ethno-religious communities try to stay within, but historically, in terms of long history, of course, people were back and forth, intermarrying, moving from place to place. Some would convert to different religions and then move to different communities. It's a reality.
Right, and so much so that I believe, if I heard correctly, the Shah and his family, they are Azerbaijani. Is that right?
Yes, yes, exactly. That's where they're from. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so guys, I am reading the chat audience, and I'm tagging the questions that I hope we can get to. I plan for us to get to at the end. I saw someone asked, "Are we reading the chat?" I don't know if the other guys are able to see it or not, but I am. And Chris, I also want to ask, and you started to get into it, as far as I think there was a report that Iran had struck Azerbaijan. Was that a mistake? Was that a provocation? Was it a false flag coming from somewhere else? Maybe not from Iran? What are your thoughts on that?
So that's what I was mentioning earlier. Iran definitely didn't do it, and they denied it. They said they wouldn't do it.
Okay. So it wasn't them, is what they're saying.
It can definitely be a false flag because now the U.S. and the Iranian Geran drone, right, the Shahid drone that they have, the Shahed, and the U.S. drone, they are basically interchanged. I mean, they look the same when they're flying through the air. They have that same delta wing pattern. They have that, fat head at the top with the warhead. So you hear the same. You hear that lawnmower, zzz, going across the sky. You don't know if it's coming from Iran, if it's coming from some Mossad group, if it's coming from US, if it's coming from a Kurdish group that's doing the bidding of the US. You have no idea. They just said, "Oh, it was Iranian."
Is it possible that Azerbaijan might take advantage of the situation? Would they try to expand their border?
Clearly no, because at this point, because they don't. Number one, they do not want. Azerbaijan is relatively, after Nagorno-Karabakh, after they took back Artsakh, they're riding that wave. Although it's, they tried to maintain. The Aliyev family has been there since the 90s, right? Since the collapse of the Soviet Union, his father and now him. So they don't really want to destabilize their situation internally. Don't forget, Azeris are ethnic. They're ethnic Azeri Turks, but they are Shia Muslims. So some of them do look to Iran as well as their co-religionists, right? And some of them do support Khamenei, at least in a marja status, in a religious clerical status. So they don't want to disrupt this because there are more Azeris in Iran than there are in Azerbaijan. They don't, and they're much more religious in the Iranian Azerbaijan. So they don't want to create a situation where they themselves will wreck their political standing and ultimately their hold on power in Baku. Why jeopardize that?
Right. Guys, you want to chime in on this at all, or should I move on to the next topic?
Let's go to the next one.
Definitely.
I agree. So my next question was, I was going to start with Constantine. We may have covered it somewhat already, but since you're the intellectual and you spent time in the U.S. and you study empires, if the U.S. is an empire, are they able to continue to juggle Ukraine, internal conflicts at home, and now this issue with Iran?
Well, they're not, obviously, and we can see that they aren't. So, I mean, like I said earlier, I would compare it to the late stage Roman Empire, when Rome was basically the city of Rome was already in decay, and only 20% of Roman citizens were actually ethnically Roman. And the city of Rome was already full of Arabs and Africans. And you can see the same in the West today if you go to all the big cities in the West. I mean, Western Europe and the United States, like London, Paris, New York. I mean, the founding stock of the United States is dwindling. Yes, I mean, you have rampant crime, you have rampant drug abuse, degeneracy, OnlyFans pornography. The borders are wide open, like Trump talks about mass deportations. They're not happening. I mean, it's all for show. Like, they drag out some cook out of a Mexican restaurant for the cameras, and they say, yeah, look, we're deporting people. They're using like ultra-violence, the ICE agents in the different cities. I mean, I guess it's just to placate the MAGA base, but in reality, they're not serious about mass deportations, because if they were serious about mass deportations in the United States, they would actually punish the businesses that hire the illegals. They would take away the incentives of the illegals to even come to the United States in the first place, and drive down the wages of the native workers, because that is what is happening. And nobody's really seriously interested in stopping mass immigration in the United States and in Western Europe. So yet the leaders of the West, of all Western nations, have no interest in doing anything that is beneficial to their native populations. They're only interested in sort of enriching the elite and the establishment that lords over the peoples, basically, of these countries. And they're trying to continuously expand. They're trying to accumulate resources. I mean, this is typical, I guess, late stage imperialist behavior. But to go back to your question, I think, they're obviously not coping. And the fact that they're not coping is proven by Iran's tenacity, because they've already survived almost a month of relentless US-Israeli attacks. And nobody expected the Iranians to retaliate in such a fashion. I mean, I was quite surprised myself. And I don't think Iran will back down. And I think the United States, they realize that Iran is not going to back down. So I suppose they're sort of hysterical right now, because they don't really know what to do, because they don't want to lose face. So they have to declare some kind of victory. And they know that the Iranians don't want to agree to a ceasefire, because the Iranians have certain demands that they want met before they agree to anything. And one of them is that the Americans have to leave West Asia, basically. And that would be, of course, a major defeat for the United States, and I mean, very difficult to pull off with saving face. So I think they're sort of like in a quagmire now, the United States. I mean, they want an off-ramp, but at the same time, they still want to keep their control and their assets in the region. So how can they do it? We don't know. We don't know how it's going to play out. But I think it will end up very badly for the United States in this region, because I think the United States will eventually lose, and it will have major consequences for the political system in the United States, especially for Donald Trump and for his administration, because they have been completely discredited. And MAGA is basically dead. It's like a corpse. I think Alexander Dugin wrote today in a cartoon that I posted earlier on my Telegram channel on my X, where it's like Dugin as Negan from The Walking Dead, defending the Congress or the Capitol in Washington, D.C. against these MAGA zombies, I mean, because that is what is happening now. You have these MAGA people that are still sort of under the illusion that Trump is doing all this to make America great. They're still trying to keep the corpse of MAGA alive. This is sort of like an analogy to the empire. when the empire is grumbling within, it is still trying to stretch out its tentacles. I mean, without in other parts of the world. But these tentacles are being cut off one by one now, I think. And the first major tentacle that is going to be cut will be the one that is in the Middle East and will be cut by Iran very soon, I think.
Yeah, I mean, if they have to fall back, and it looks like they're going to, that would put us firmly on the path of a multipolar world, correct?
I would also argue Konstantin is absolutely right. And also there's another danger that lurks. We are in the midterm election season now. I do think Democrats are going to make significant gains. I would also argue, maybe it's too early to call, but I think that we could see a Democrat come to the presidency after 2 years, which means a reorientation of the US back to supporting Ukraine. So I want people to recognize that this situation, this global situation, is not going to end anytime soon. We are going to be in a protracted crisis. Imagine hypothetically that we get peace. We get peace in the Middle East right now. Trump agrees to a ceasefire. They agree to some terms. If there's no Palestinian state and Israel continues to do what it does, and Israel continues to assassinate and bomb so-called proxies of Iran, where do you think we're going to be in another year or 2 years with another cycle of violence? Where do you think we'll be in Ukraine if the Democrats come back to power? And now, seeing what they've seen, they give Zelensky or his successor, who could be even more radical, whatever they want. You want cruise missiles? We'll give you cruise missiles, because they're so angry at Trump having acquiesced to what they think of, Putin and Dmitriev and all of this stuff. I just want people to know that this period that we're in is going to be much longer, I think, than people expect. And it's going to probably have ebbs and flows, but I guarantee you that Ukrainian nationalists will not accept the new borders of the state, whatever those borders will be. If we go all the way to Odessa and get to Prednistrovy, if we stop at the 4 oblasts and we take the 4 oblasts that have now been incorporated under the Constitution of the Russian Federation, I don't know. But I will tell you that we're going to experience profound terrorism, profound violence, especially in these conflict zones for years, if not decades to come. Because the main issue for those of us who were military or diplomats or people involved in government is you can have a just peace and you can also have an unjust peace. So you can reach a peace agreement now, but it might not be a just peace. It might be an unjust peace, and those bumbling and sort of rumblings underneath, they will again explode. So and that's why the Russian Federation is so clear every time. We need to address the root causes. If you don't address the root causes, if you don't address what is the cause of the conflict to begin with, then how are you going to solve this situation and a new conflict from arising from the same conditions that you've left now fertile for those roots to then shoot up again into new chaos and new war and new violence? That's why I think that we need to understand that we're in this for the long haul. We're not going out of a job anytime soon, gentlemen. We are going to be in this for the long term. And birthing a multipolar world, just like the collapse of the Roman Empire or the fall of Byzantium, is measured in centuries. It's not measured in years. We've become accustomed to years because we live in a capitalist society that everything is, fast-paced and instant gratification. But as a historian, I can tell you, the process of a multipolar world, our great-grandchildren will see it come to fruition. We won't necessarily see it. We will see the beginnings of the architecture and the beginnings of the processes, but these are going to be long-term processes.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. But 100%. It's the same with the decline of the West, by the way, because a lot of people, especially on the right, they say, there's this accelerationist theory that if things get worse, people will finally wake up and resist, but not really, right? Because sometimes worse is just worse. And people don't necessarily wake up because they're not necessarily asleep, because people get used to anything over a period of time. It's like the frog in the boiling water analogy. It's just very, 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 very slow process, because again, like you said, the birth of multipolarity can take centuries. I mean, it's the same with the fall of the West. It's not just like today the West is alive and thriving and tomorrow everything is in ruins. It's just a very, 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 very slow process. And I wouldn't even call it the fall of the West. I think it's more of a transformative process, because what we call Western culture, Western civilization, is basically, well, it is sort of disintegrating, but something new is at the same time being born and replacing it. And this process, again, can take centuries.
I think a capstone to this talk right now is something we didn't mention, but there's an esoteric nature to everything going on as well. When you bring in all the major religions of the world chiming in, influencing different populations on this topic. I mean, if you look at the messianic kind of overtures that occur out of Israel in terms of creating, a future temple on the Dome of the Rock, and these horrific, esoteric, prophetic things that are occurring. And Russia is famous for having, a politician named Zhirinovsky who did, some fantastic future talks about what a Middle Eastern conflict would look like. And he's basically nailed the timing to it in terms of it occurring, and making comments of such nature where, the Ukrainian conflict will disappear in that mess, right? Because it will be such a horrific situation going on in Iran and the Middle East that the attention will steer away from Ukraine. Mm-hmm. And I think that's why, you hear a lot of this esoteric talk, even within the American, on the media, with, commanders having messianic talks with their troops even before going into the conflict, which is to me crazy as a military officer, hearing some of their religious talk that were, coming and being reported by U.S. troops. And you could see that the troops within the American forces, there's a lot of dissent there. And unfortunately, there's lots of movement. I mean, I'm catching lots of deployment, movement of troops towards the Middle East now. So I don't think it's unified. And I think it's like definitely building on what Constantine's saying. There's the Roman Empire kind of disintegrating.
What makes me think right now, well, listening to you guys, is it's kind of like, because I've been looking at the Russia-Ukraine conflict, right? That's been my main thing, because I came here 8 days before the special military operation, as I always say, with my family. And so I started the channel with this goal to innocently show Russia's normal to the West. And then that wasn't working. So now the show has to become more political. Let's try and hopefully this conflict will stop soon. I'm sure it'll stop soon, but I'm thinking of like an iceberg now, where just a little bit is coming out of the water, and you just see the little bit, and it's so much more is underwater. And I think that's what we're dealing with. And when this thing happened with Iran, and I realized, as we all did, or you already knew, it's all connected. And what I was thinking today, preparing for this, and with the title World War III, which I think is a good question, because everything is connected, it is consuming the world right now, is that, man, Joe, I was telling myself, this is not about to end. This is not like, oh, the Ukraine is almost out of men and Russia's going to move to the river and then that's it. This is something massive, and there is so much going on behind the scenes that we don't even see. There's this giant iceberg under the water, and we're just getting glimpses as to what's going on. And if we are headed to a multipolar world, which I'm sure we are, I mean, that's going to be, gosh, so many political earthquakes and just life, pain, earthquakes, and loss. So if you're a religious person, it's definitely a time, where we, that needs prayer, for sure. It's yeah. So it's a sobering time, a sad time.
Basically getting used to live in times of war, not just for a couple of years, but for generations. Like Chris said earlier, like in the past, when people were born and they died in times of war, like the 100 Years' War or the 30 Years' War in the Middle Ages, or
Right.
I mean, I guess we're entering another one of these epochs, basically.
Right.
And Constantine said something important here. The peace that we experienced from the end of World War II, the relative peace, I will say, because it wasn't peaceful for everyone, obviously, but the relative peace of the West from the end of World War II all the way till the collapse of the Soviet Union a little bit after, that is slowly eroding. It's eroding also because they didn't preserve the peace. We should note that. But also because of the decisions that were made historically and the trajectories that we've been on and the failed policies and the belligerent policies of some leaders, now we're on a course where I think Konstantin's right. We're going to live. I mean, imagine how many people under the monarchy in Sweden or before in the Germanic princely states were born and died under war conditions. It was a reality. Actually, for most of human history, it was a reality for people involved in many polities and areas that were at war at their borders, at their periphery, with invasions, with pushing out, with expansion. We're just living through another one of those phases, and people have to then come to terms with the reality of no longer living with that relative peace and middle-class life that we were so used to. Especially, I grew up in the US. I was born and raised in the US. Marcel in Canada, right? Joe as well in the US, right? We grew up and it was like middle America. All right, gonna go play baseball. You go to high school, you have your girl, you take her out to the movies, you have ice cream, everybody's enjoying life. That is unique in human history, actually. If you're a historian, most people didn't. Our ancestors were just trying to survive from the harvest and trying to survive from getting taken into some big army to go and fight, whether it be a crusade, whether it be a war of liberation, a revolution, you name it. So I just want people to come to terms with that we are also dealing with a loss as well. We're dealing with the loss of the comforts of life, and we have to live with this new discomfort, and we have to make adjustments in our lives. It's just a reality now.
Right. Okay, well, let's get back to some of the specifics because I want to get through these. We have a couple questions left that I made, and then I want to get to the audience questions. As far as Armenia and Azerbaijan, because the U.S. was trying to make a deal between those two countries, and I was thinking at the time, I guess it started like a year ago, right? Something like that. I was thinking, why are they messing with that part of the world? It's none of their business. So, Philip, how do you see this? How do you think this deal might be affected now between Armenia and Azerbaijan?
Yeah, look, I don't even think there was really a deal there in the first place. Personally, it's a sort of deal on paper, but from what I've experienced in real life, there was far from a deal. I mean, I've to this day, I mean, I've had issues dealing with the authorities in Baku trying to obtain documents to get my daughter and myself Armenian citizenship, for example, because through ancestral roots, apparently I'm entitled to this passport, but they still, and even after this deal was done, I've said to the authorities, look, there's a peace deal now. Why are you still, being very anti? But as soon as they hear anything to do about Armenia, they just shut you down completely. So I think it was just a sort of paper exercise, really, and the US, tried to, wade in on, deals and wars thousands of miles away that they probably shouldn't have got involved with, just to sort of win some political points, or to say they've ended this historic war. But yeah, like I say, I don't think the Armenians and the Azerbaijanis saw it the same as than Donald Trump and the US did.
Marcel, how do you think we're going to see the power shift in the Middle East in regards to U.S. resources based on all that we've talked about?
Yeah, well, I think we're going to see the U.S.-Israeli conflict with Iran causing significant division of American military resources from other global regions to the Middle East. This strategic shift is going to have a complex ripple effect, reshaping power dynamics, not only to the Middle East, but to Asia Pacific and Europe. We're already hearing about resources coming out of South Korea and Japan to support this effort. there's deployments, and you're seeing them on YouTube, on TikTok. Troops are being deployed out of San Diego, one Marine Corps base, and they're all heading this way. And there's significant assets. And you see that Iran is countering. They've launched an attack, I believe, in the last 24 hours, hitting the town of Dimona, which is essentially where the strategic ambiguity doctrine exists with Israel having nuclear weapons, and they call it the bomb in the basement theory. And as well as Iran attempting, from my understanding, to attack Diego Garcia, which is a British base out into I think it's the Indian Ocean. So maybe wrap it back up to Zhirinovsky's prophecy and talk about politics, is that it's going to keep the Americans very busy with what's going on in the Middle East. And I see that actually expanding more. In terms of winners and losers in the long term, the shift of resources is definitely going to be in the interest of Russia and China, obviously. And from an energy perspective, I think the big loser here is Europe. But military deployments along that area are going to be required. Going back to maybe strategically how the West is operating with its elite supporting think tanks, there's been a very, very long concerted effort to try and break Russia. And some of the access routes means and mechanisms is regime change operations by, using the National Endowment for Democracies, open source societies, and those kind of foundational CIA tactics have actually been failing miserably. I think most significantly since the Belarus and Georgia campaigns. But they're definitely interested in the soft underbelly of achieving influence under Russia, and that's what we have to watch for.
Constantine, to what extent do you think Germany is going to get involved in Iran?
Well, Germany is already involved in Iran because Germany is an occupied country. It's been occupied by the United States since 1945, so it's a vassal state. It's like a U.S. satrapy. And the United States is using Ramstein Air Base, for example, for Operation Epic Fury, or Epic Fail, some people say. And the German government is tolerating it. So it didn't tell the United States government that you're not allowed to use these bases on German territory for attacks against a sovereign country, which violates, quote unquote, international law, which in my opinion doesn't really exist. But some people argue it exists. I mean, the German government certainly argues that international law exists. And it always cherishes the notion of international law. That's why the German government has come under heavy criticism internally from opposition parties and the media, certain media, not all mainstream media, of course. I mean, for tolerating it, for allowing the United States to use their bases on German territory against attacks against Iran. I mean, the German Chancellor, Friedrich Merz, he has already ruled out direct, military participation. But at the same time, because of Germany's lack of sovereignty, they cannot really act against the interests of the United States. They can't even criticize it too heavily. I mean, Merz was a guest at the White House a couple of weeks ago. I think a couple of days after the attack had begun, and he was just talking with Donald Trump and basically arguing that America's cause in attacking Iran together with Israel was a just one, because Iran cannot have nuclear weapons and it's an evil mullah regime, and all the claptrap that you hear all the time, all this nonsense. I mean, that's already been discredited, but they're still making the same arguments. And if you look at the regular mainstream media, you don't really hear real criticism of U.S. and Israeli actions in Iran. like you did maybe in the 1970s at the height of the Vietnam War, when the entire Western European press, and I mean even the press in the United States, was like vocally critical of, I mean, certain actions by the U.S. military, especially against the civilian population. But I mean, it's all very subdued. Like even the massacre of the schoolgirls, where almost like 200 schoolgirls were murdered basically by the U.S. military in Iran, was just like a side note somewhere, you know, like just, yeah, okay, in the German media, you know, it's like, and it was always framed like Iran claims that 200 schoolgirls were murdered. It didn't say 200 schoolgirls were, I mean, massacred or killed, but Iran said so. I mean, already like distancing the reader from the event. Right?
There's an interesting segue with the attack on the girls' school is that from an intelligence perspective, I'm hearing undercurrents that the targeting mechanisms that are being used is artificial intelligence. And in the past, U.S. military would have a cell to select targets, right? And they would validate what targets would be have risk of, you know, casualties, civilian casualties. But those mechanisms and, you know, have been pulled away in the U.S. military command structure, I understand. So they've heavily relied on artificial intelligence, which is obviously a big error because you can get false positives, and that's my understanding. Maybe the cause of that attack on the girls' school is that used to be back in the day a certain military function, while the database doesn't get updated. And I'm not speculating that that's 100%, but that's what I'm hearing is the main cause of that strike. But it's very sinister to allow an artificial intelligence network to select your targets and removing a human touch to it in terms of making sure that there's a reduction of casualties.
And interesting.
I would add just Constantine quickly for that point, so that I'm sure Constantine knows as well, because Professor Morandi has said actually that there's evidence that they're using AI because they bombed Police Park. It's just an open park in Tehran, but because it has police in the name, the artificial intelligence gave the coordinates to the pilots. The pilots had the bomb package and, you know, the listing of targets, and just sent the bomb. And, you know, with the GPS, it landed there. But it's just a park. It's just an open park, but it has police in the name. So they've taken all of the data in the country, all the names of everything, anything with army, military, this, that. Imagine for us in the US and Canada, I'm sure in Germany too, we have military surplus stores. Imagine they just start bombing military surplus stores simply because it has Army, Navy surplus in the name. But that's what they're doing now.
I think in Russia, the hockey teams are named after military and police and things like this, right?
Exactly. So imagine now you're trusting AI, and so you just say AI, okay, give me all of the military targets, and boom, it just lists them all out there, anything with a name, you know? Go ahead, Constantine, sorry.
No, it's okay. It's fine. It's very interesting, though. Like, I was not aware of this. And just regarding the girls' school, there was actually an interesting article in the New York Times about it, because the New York Times, they create this hypothetical scenario. Just imagine, like, Iran had like air bases in Mexico and launched missiles into California to destroy some military installation, but by accident they hit some elementary school in, like, I don't know, in a suburb of Los Angeles, and like 200 like students die. Like, I don't know, imagine the outrage, like, globally, like, in the media. It would never end. It would go on for months and possibly years, right? But here it happened, and nobody is saying it didn't happen, but it's just like there one day, and then nobody mentions it the next day. Like, the U.S. government didn't apologize. They even said the Iranians bombed their own school with a tomahawk. You know, it's crazy. It's completely crazy. The immorality, the total, I would say, lack of any kind of human decency is staggering, in my opinion. Yes, I mean, yeah, and it's the same in the German media. The double standard is just totally ridiculous, of course.
My visceral reaction when it happened was like, oh, they needed a human sacrifice to give this conflict power from hell, you know, and you know, I try not to go down that dark path, but I mean, like, that looked like a satanic ritual killing if I could ever en masse.
Yeah,
That's
well,
how some Iranians are seeing it. That's how some Iranians have seen it and have understood it. You saw them burning ball statues earlier.
yeah,
They really believe that the West, with this Epstein regime, Epstein class, Epstein world order, they believe it's satanic. They don't believe that they believe in God, because people who do this don't believe in God.
Ceremonies at the beginning of every Olympic event now, like
Come on.
ask it to
Gosh, the Olympics. That was embarrassing, and that's from the West.
Right. They're not afraid to show the worship of Baal and Baphomet, and that's what's infected the Western culture to mental strategic display for everybody to see. It's horrible.
Yeah.
So what about American casualties, though? Because we don't really know, like, American casualty numbers, the real ones, because obviously the United States government is trying to hide the real numbers. I mean, there's some like hints, I suppose. Like there's this hospital near Kaiserslautern in Germany where there's a big American military base, where I guess it was on the news as well, where a couple of weeks ago, basically they were at the U.S. Army hospital or U.S. military hospital, were basically saying that they're not going to perform births anymore at this hospital. Like the wives of the soldiers should go to like surrounding hospitals, like German hospitals, basically to give birth, because they needed a facility urgently for medical procedures, which a lot of people interpreted as casualties being flown in from the Middle East, because that's where the first go, because it's much closer than the US, right?
This would definitely be up my wheelhouse, because I'm a former healthcare administrator. So we participated in planning military medical evacuations from role 1, 2, 3, 4 to the strategic rear of any kind of conflict. So they have hospital ships that can provide surgical care at very high levels that could be out there supporting these operations. You won't know the casualties. And never mind just the Iranian conflict, you talk about all the mercenaries, volunteers who have helped Ukraine, and they've become maimed or injured. And you don't hear much about the casualties there. They're being probably evacuated, and there's designated hospitals, and it's all kept hush under, strict medical confidentiality, right? There's a very sacred thing within the medical system is medical confidentiality. So you're not going to hear about it. The mainstream media has no interest in showing it. You might start hearing grumbling if they're going back and requiring services for deceased members more. And I think we're beyond 5 for sure deceased members at this point. But there's many ways to evacuate soldiers, and depending on the level of injury, and once you start needing plastic surgery, that's obviously going to happen within usually the nation that's the soldiers from. They'll be evacuated that far back to do that. I actually can hear a detonation in the background, by the way.
Wow. Yeah. So, guys, we were talking offline before today, and Marcel was telling us that he's got some issues where he's staying right now. So. I mean, I was not a military guy, but it's important for us to remember who aren't military people or haven't been, that when you hear about someone being deleted in battle, that's not all. I mean, it's my understanding that there could be like 2 more that are like severely injured for life forever, so it's not just the people that are deleted. It's, like double that of people that are going to have to carry these scars forever, whether it be missing limbs or whatnot. I have one more specific question for Chris, and then a kind of a group question for everybody. Do you think, Chris, that we're going to see escalation in the Caspian Sea?
Yes, it's only a matter of time, but absolutely, we'll see it. Don't forget, for the US-EU NATO access, if you want to say that, Georgia is pivotal. You saw multiple attempts at color revolution in Georgia. You've seen Armenia, Azerbaijan, the US getting involved there now. Of course, the Caucasus Caspian region and the neighboring countries in the Caspian, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, all of these countries, They also, the 5 leaders of the Central Asian countries were at the White House as well. And then Putin asked, oh my God, his name is Jokar. Yes, I think the leader of Kazakhstan to come to Moscow after he went to Washington, because Washington wanted to court the Central Asian countries again. So the Caspian region at large is very, very critical. Those who want to contain Russia have always seen the Caspian as necessary. That's why they supported the Shah so much. That's why they supported his secret police, the Savak, because they went after communists at the time of the Soviet Union. They went after anybody who would give Iran a more Eurasian feel than a pro-Western one. So Caspian, absolutely. It's only a matter of time for the conflict.
There's already been drone strikes within the Caspian region against
For sure. No.
Shipping of drones between Russia and Ukraine. So Russia and Iran.
And also, is the Israeli Air Force, I believe, has destroyed all of Iran's navy according to their reports. They've destroyed Iran's navy in the Caspian. So the Caspian absolutely is definitely part of the conflict. And in the broader sort of Brzezinski mindset, the Caspian is critical for the control.
How could de-escalation be applied in the Caspian area?
I mean, de-escalation in the Caspian requires de-escalation on all fronts. It's not only the Caspian area. It's going to require complete transformation. So long as the US and the EU and NATO countries pursue a policy of containment of Russia, containment of China, trying to destroy their spheres of influence, their historical spheres of influence, pushing Russophobia, pushing sort of Soviet decommunization kind of rules that promote the idea that fascism and, that Hitler and Stalin were the same, which is absolutely ahistorical. And condemned by the Russian Federation. The more that they do this, the more we're going to see conflict. If they were to stop doing that and to just leave the sphere of influence as it is, then you're going to have no issues. Russia wants good relations with its neighbors. It's not looking to increase its territory and expansion. Iran also the same, doesn't have any irredentist claims to its neighbors. But so long as those countries in the West continue to push the buttons in Eurasia, you're going to see conflict everywhere erupt.
Right. Okay, well, my last question, and then we'll do some audience questions before we hang up. Is Trump's approach to Venezuela and Iran different from Putin's approach in Ukraine? Constantine?
I think it's completely different, right? It cannot be compared. Putin's actions in Ukraine were only reactions to provocations by the West and the conflict which was started by the West in Ukraine in 2014. I mean, the Russian military just officially entered the conflict in 2022, but it doesn't mean the conflict started there, because it didn't. And it entered the conflict for defensive measures to protect the Russian population in certain territories of what was Ukraine, but was then declared independent. And what's happening in Venezuela and Iran were obviously like completely imperialist claims to territory and resources. Just basically might is right, naked aggression by the United States, and they're not even trying to hide it anymore. And Margarita Simonyan said this the other day. She said that no matter what happens, she still likes Trump, because Trump at least pulls back the mask and reveals the empire for what it really is. Because what America does right now, like with Venezuela and Iran, is nothing really new. Yes, because the United States has always been engaged in such actions, but it always clothed such actions in sort of like certain propagandistic rhetoric, like bringing democracy, toppling the new Hitler, but they're not even trying to hide it anymore. And this is why it's sort of refreshing what is happening now. I mean, it's terrible, but it's refreshing because at least you're being honest what they're doing now. Yes, because Trump said, well, we want Venezuela's oil. basically. With Iran, they're not even trying to come up with a reason why they invaded Iran, because I heard at least like 10 different reasons from the US government already. They keep changing the goalposts. Nobody really even knows. I mean, we all know why they really did it, but they're not even trying on the world stage to present some sort of coherent narrative. They don't need it anymore, apparently. And the German government is the same, by the way. The German government always like trumps international law. It's super important that everybody follows international law. But at the same time, it does not condemn the US and Israel for attacking Iran, again, against quote unquote international law. Netanyahu, he landed in Berlin a couple of weeks ago after the war had already started, but the German government did not arrest Netanyahu and deliver him to the International Criminal Court, even though it is obliged to do so according to quote-unquote international law, which basically just proves, again, and shows the rest of the world that this whole talk about international law that the West has always been engaged in is just a farce. It's not. International law is basically what the West has always used to justify its own aggressions. And as soon as it is somehow directed against its own interests, it disregards it completely.
Well, and just how easy is it now that just how useless is the United Nations turned into at this point? And you hear the leader of the United Nations, I can't remember his name, but there's nothing to take seriously anymore, right? Like it's an institution that needs to be seriously restored. I've been to the United Nations. As a student at the Royal Military College, I was invited to go there, and I went and seen how it was. I've had a dinner with the ambassador of Canada to the United Nations, a mission there. And, it's the only place where people can get together and talk amongst each other, nation to nation. That's its strength, but its weakness is that they're only talking, right? And there's not really much happening.
Right.
So it's a strength and a weakness at the same time. The United Nations arguably probably shouldn't exist as it is anymore. I would argue that it probably needs to move around the planet, actually, at this point. And from country to country we'll meet instead of in New York, where it's like bolstering the hegemony of the US dollar and its imperial catastrophe that it's unleashing on the planet right now.
I would also.
Why do you guys think that the international community sees Putin and Trump differently?
Well, but I would say the wars are different, and Putin and Trump are different. Putin is highly educated, an intelligence man, also comes from that intelligence military background, very disciplined. You see that in his own personal life. He's extremely disciplined. He's extremely even-keeled. He is a classic statesman. When you think about statesmen and diplomacy and sort of, these kind of astute kind of leaders, he is that definition. Trump is erratic. He's a person that comes from the business world and show business world. So he's very much not.
He has no diplomatic corps. He's
absolutely not.
Ridiculous.
He's more like a gangster. He's more like a gangster.
Exactly.
Than he is.
He's a gangster. Definitely.
Absolutely. And you see how he operates like that. For example, when Putin and Xi Jinping shake hands, they shake hands respectfully. They don't pull each other in, right? They shake hands as equal partners. Trump always grabs a hand and pulls the person in. You have that famous video. Putin let it happen. But Putin is much stronger because he doesn't give it any sort of air. He doesn't allow it to dominate. And Putin has a sign of respect. Also, Russia and Ukraine they're the same nation historically. They are brothers and sisters. They are families. I was in Suja 2 months ago. I've been to Kursk Oblast, to Belgorod, all over the Donbass. People have family on the other side. People are, were Ukrainian citizens that are now Russian citizens. Like, these are all people who belong to the same empire, the Soviet Union together, and now they're divided because of the post-Soviet condition. And this Ukrainian nationalism has been imported from outside. It was not domestic, okay? And Russia is not bombing Kiev and other cities like, for example, Israel did in Gaza, or like Iran is doing, or like the US is doing in Iran. They respect because they see that as their own. That's where the history, Kiev and Rus, everything. That's where the start was. So why to do that? So I think that you have to understand that Russia is doing this surgically. Russia is doing this methodically. It's trying not to have civilian casualties because the civilians are their own. Whereas the US and Israel could care less about the people in Iran, the people in Venezuela. What do they care? It's not their people. And even they still talk down about them. Even the migrants are talked down upon. If Trump cared about Venezuelans like he does Americans, he wouldn't have, for example, said about Venezuelans what he did and done what he did about the immigration. But he doesn't. Whereas Ukrainians, most Ukrainians who left Ukraine came to Russia. That's a fact that nobody wants to acknowledge. Most Ukrainians who left live in Russia now and have Russian citizenship. So that's the truth. This is where they see. This is where they see the
and you say Trump is a sportsman, but Trump was a showman, but I would say that Putin is a sportsman, and specifically as a judo master, he's I'm well aware that his politics actually mirror his judo style, where you take your opponent and you let their own weight be their own enemy, and they're doing that with the United States right now.
Exactly. Why stop them? Let them destroy themselves. Let them bring themselves down.
So then why does the international community flip it and consider Putin the bad guy?
Because he's been in power too long. They don't.
But what is the international community?
Exactly.
Right? The international community, the self-proclaimed quote unquote international community are the Western states, which in reality are a global minority. The real international community, without quotation marks, is the global South, meaning the global majority. And they definitely respect Putin much more than Trump, for sure.
Absolutely. Without a doubt.
Yeah, and unfortunately for Russia and Putin, he's the only one standing up against this Western degradation of imperialism that they only will be satisfied if they're able to take 80% of Iran's resources, and then there'll be a democracy. That's how it's going to work. If it's going to work in Iran for the Western powers, that's how it was. I read the book Oil Kings, the Iranian history, and that's what it was all about then, and that's what it's all about now, trying to do a historical repeat of putting up a Shah again. It's all the Western resources, putting their tentacles within Russia, trying to extract resources from us to them, or Russia to the West. And that is the game, and it's failed. And that's why Putin is so hated. Nothing to do with Putin as the individual, actually. It's just a matter of standing up to neocolonialism, and especially how crazy it got during the recent times of where neoliberalism became, so vain in terms of putting individual rights to such an extreme perspective above family cultures and all that kind of stuff, and religious and people respecting each other's faiths and stuff. I mean, the Western civilization has basically turned, as you say, into a collapsed Roman vomodrome, to be so vile, I guess.
Right. All right, guys. Well, let's get to the audience and take some audience questions before we wrap it up here, before we end. First one is for Philip from Stephen Smith. As a Brit living in Russia, would Philip agree that Starmer is the worst UK prime minister ever, and that his dogged opposition to Russia is primarily an attempt to compensate for his own inadequacies?
Well, hi, Stephen. Yes. Well, look, I agree with you that Keir Starmer's the worst prime minister ever in UK history. But would I agree that he's trying to do what he is against Russia because of his own inadequacies? Probably not. Look, I mean, if you look at every past prime minister, whether it's Conservative, whether it's Labour prime ministers, they've all had this stance, this positive stance towards Ukraine, and this negative stance towards evil Russia. I don't think that's to sort of cover up anything about his own abilities as prime minister at all. But I do agree with you that he's not that great in terms of a prime minister.
It's
Well, here's one I think for Chris from Peter Frowine. Is Israel leadership insane enough to drop nukes on Iran? I think they are.
Yes, I
Peter
do think
says.
so. I do think so. We have, of course, Seymour Hersh in his famous The Samson Doctrine about what Israeli nuclear policy looks like. And that was from people like Ari Ben Menashe. Of course, we had the famous leak from Mordechai Vanunu. So we know that Israel will use even tactical nuclear weapons if there is a threat to the state of Israel, to the extent where they believe that it's existential for them to use them. And since you've seen, and since Marcel has eloquently said, since they're run by half religious nuts, messianic, waiting for the third temple, the red heifer, everything like that, they are crazy enough to do something like that. They believe this is the messianic moment for them. So
it's crazy. And I think, how did the West allow them to have the Samson Doctrine? But I assume it came later, after they had nuclear capability.
I just want to add a point to this. Iran doesn't need a nuclear weapon. You know why? All they have to do is drop a hypersonic missile on Damona's nuclear plant. And that's
exactly.
a nuclear. They never needed a nuclear weapon in the first place.
Yep, you're absolutely right.
Wow.
If they wanted to, Iran could create a nuclear catastrophe in Israel right now. But they know that that won't only affect Israelis, it affects Palestinians, and they have some humanity, so they're not going to do that. They go around it so that Israel knows that they are capable of doing it. But they could put not one, they could put a couple hypersonics onto Dimona.
Interesting.
You know,
very interesting. Peter's follow-up is, when Israel does drop nukes on Iran, how will Iran, Russia, China respond? What do you guys think?
Russia and China won't respond unless it affects their territories. But they know that if they were to do that, Israel could also target them. That's the Samson Doctrine also says that those countries would be targeted in the effect of a state of Israel collapse. So we have to know that unless it affects their countries, they won't get involved. If it happens to Iran, I could foresee massive regional reverberations about that. I mean, that would be a game changer. I mean, a couple bombs dropping, I can understand. An atomic bomb, a nuclear weapon on Iran, I mean, that's a whole different type of scenario at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. Although, sadly, I don't know how DC can look any uglier than the Epstein, scandal that was just uncovered. So, so do you consider England a legitimate target after the Storm Shadow attack? Philip, what do you think?
Yeah, I don't know if they're talking about a specific attack here or not, but
the Bryansk, I think the Bryansk one, where they were using storm shadows.
Yes, that was Bryansk.
Okay. Well, look, I don't think at this point England's going to be a target, because I think it's going to have huge consequences if there was a target. If London was a target, I don't think it's anyone wants it to escalate, and if it went down that road, I don't think it's going to end well for anyone. So I don't think specifically it's going to be. I don't think England's going to be sort of top on the list at the moment because of any attack that I wasn't too familiar with that particular attack, to be honest. But I don't think given any attacks or anything else going on, I don't think at this point England would be a huge target for Iran at this point.
Anyone else want to chime in on that?
Well, I would just say that the risk for the Brits at this point is Russia's going to employ probably the same strategy as Iran and use strategic, patience in this situation. And however, I would say that if they have special clandestine operations occurring south of the border here, they will get touched.
And by the way, I saw there was one other sort of, I guess, with this, there was two questions from this person. I noticed, why English people support this madness? Well, I don't think a lot of them do. The ones I've spoken to don't seem to support what's going on. So maybe
like normal Americans, you could say, you feel like there's a lot of normal Brits that don't support this.
Yeah, I think I've spoken to a lot of people that don't.
And you know what? Let's just about Russia phobia. A lot of that seems to be a crown initiative historically. Let's be honest, and it originates out of the UK. It's mostly this Russia phobia, and it's definitely a stronger vibe there coming out of the UK and out of the English kind of traditions. And to me, that's a lot of where Russia phobia originates from, especially monarchies, right? Like I said, the Ukraine conflict is so layered with issues that go back even into history, you know, revolutions, whatnot.
And actually, just I know it's going a bit off topic, but I mean, I was asked in a BBC interview literally a few days ago. You know, oh, you know, you're in Russia. You know, it's illegal to be. They made a specific comment about illegal to be gay, for example, in Russia, and I said, look. Firstly, it's not illegal to be gay. It's illegal to wave around all this LGBT propaganda or whatever. But secondly, why are you not saying all this stuff about the UAE or some of these Middle Eastern countries? Because I'm pretty sure it's actually illegal in the UAE to be gay. It's illegal to share a hotel room with someone of the same sex or an opposite sex if they're an unmarried couple. None of this hostility ever gets said about places like the UAE or other countries in the Middle East, but it's always against Russia. Why is that? What is that?
Well, it's a double standard, right? They did the same. They did the same with the rainbow flag. They put it up like they hung it from the American embassy in Moscow, and people rightfully ask, why didn't you do the same at the American embassy in Riyadh, for example?
Exactly.
I mean, we all know the answer, right?
Money.
So,
Right.
yeah.
Right. So, Marcel, we have a question for you regarding drone. I believe they mean activity. How close do you think Russia is to having an effective alternative to and defense against Starlink? Again, this is from Stephen
I
Smith.
think the whole Starlink story of Russia using Starlink, and then they were sort of, losing access to Starlink.
Booted off. Yeah.
To me, that was all propaganda.
Okay.
I don't see any viability to that story. I think it was again an inserted disinformation campaign.
Okay. This may be for you, Phil, because you spent a lot of time in Asia. How would the yuan currency affect the
the
global
Chinese
bank
currency.
institution? Yuan, sorry, worldwide.
I don't know what context I mean by that. It's obviously it is an important currency on international markets for sure. When it comes to any currency, the yuan is an important one there. But I don't know exactly what context.
Yeah,
that
no
you mean.
worries. We'll keep it moving.
Oh yeah, I think it was in
Yuan.
terms of reserve currency, maybe like a petrodollar, yuan dollar, or yuan reserve. People are thinking about that.
Okay. And we have a question for Michael for Constantine, I believe. Does he play the cello? My favorite instrument?
I don't play the cello. It's my younger daughter's cello behind me. So my younger daughter plays the cello. I've been playing it for a while. My older daughter plays the piano and the church organ.
Okay. Maybe this is for Chris. You think there are any unknown ships from Russia to Iran through the Caspian Sea?
When they mean unknown ships, they mean sort of like a ghost fleet, like a black fleet. I mean,
I guess so, yeah.
the Caspian Sea is heavily monitored. It's always been monitored from the Cold War till now. So I'm sure that there might be some smaller ships that try to, skirt their way. But with Azerbaijan and other countries in the region playing both sides and kind of, which side are we on? We're on the U.S., Israel, Turkey side. I think that I don't think it's so easy to have a ghost fleet like that. I think they're pretty well known, at least through satellite imagery.
Right. I've got more questions, but before I go on to them, I just noticed the time. I know some of you have to get off for your next live in like 30 minutes, 40 minutes. So why don't we go around and say where people can find us? So take this moment to advertise ourselves real quickly, so I don't forget, and then I'll get back to the questions, and you guys feel free to drop off as you need to. I like to do 90-minute streams, but since there's so many of us here and we had so much to talk about, I let this one go on and become epic. So Chris, tell people where they can find you.
Sure. So I'm on X, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, all major social media platforms. So you can find me at Chris Halali or Christopher Halali Official on YouTube. And thank you all again for having me. It's a real pleasure. If you're still live, tonight, if you're still a viewer and interested, I'll be on George Galloway's Moats now. And then after, DD Geopolitics is having our show. So make sure to drop in on that. And thank you all again. It's always a pleasure to be with you all. Look forward to seeing you fine gentlemen, hopefully soon in person.
That's right. And if you guys are watching this on my YouTube, Expat American, I've put all these guys' links in the description. I don't know if that what I type transfers over to X or not. So Marcel, how about you?
Well, I just want to thank everybody for having a very interesting conversation panel about such a horrible topic. Hopefully we'll have some positive things come in the world that shock us all in a good way. And that's my goal. I'm not too concerned about people following my content. It's there if people want to enjoy it. But I wish everybody well here and have a great evening.
Awesome. Constantine?
Well, thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it, and it was certainly a very enlightening discussion, and I myself learned a lot of new things. You can find me on X. I have a Telegram channel, Eurosiberia, and I have a Substack, eurosiberia.net, on which I publish 1 or 2 essays per week.
Good. Philip?
Yeah, again, thanks for having me, Joe. It's always a nice conversation, and yeah, people can find me on YouTube at Moscow Connect, and we're going to be doing some pretty interesting stuff over the next few weeks as we travel around Russia looking for some amazing foreigners to put forward to the Bridge Awards 2026, which is a new initiative we got going in partnership with Moscow City Government and the Agency of Strategic Initiative. So yeah, look out for all the stuff that we're doing on the channel and on, probably can't talk about it, but RT and others over the coming weeks.
Very good. All right. And yeah, and guys, so drop off as you need to. I'll be going through the questions here, and also please everyone share our videos, because that is one of the ways that you can help us hopefully make a positive difference in this world. So next question. I still don't understand the US endgame here, just like Afghanistan when they did 20 years and replaced the Taliban with the Taliban. What is a win for them?
Well, I think that I don't understand the end game either, to be honest. And I think the Trump administration doesn't understand the end game, because I think
it's mostly about military grift, in my opinion, contracting grifts that occur within the military industrial complex of the United States.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think the US just wanted to go in basically together with Israel, and they thought they could finish it in 4 days, like by killing their leader. They thought the regime would sort of collapse, but it didn't happen. And now they don't know what to do, basically. They had no plan B. I think that's what it looks like to me.
Okay.
You know, it was probably good intentions,
Go ahead,
right?
Marcel.
There was good intentions in terms of trying to bring some modernization into Afghanistan. I think there was some good intentions behind it. It came in deceptively, but there's so much corruption within the military industrial complex of contracting and big lucrative windfalls for people who pick up contracts to support such an operation. And those things cost billions of dollars. And when there's billions of dollars to be made, it happens.
Right. Next question. How will prices of fuels in Poland be affected by the conflict? This is from Michaz.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it'll be heavily affected in the same way that we've seen instability with UK and European oil prices. Obviously, Poland stopped buying Russian oil in 2022, like most of the EU. So I think they will be affected. I mean, we've already seen prices increase quite significantly in the UK and other parts of Europe. So it's inevitable, really.
Increasing in Canada already, and I'm sure Constantine can attest that the exploding of the Nord Stream 1 was, such a strategic failure for Germany that
there's so many strategic failures. Like, just I mean, after the conflict started with the sanctions, refusing Russian energy, almost simultaneously dismantling the entire nuclear power system. No more nuclear power plants in Germany. And then, of course, Nord Stream 2, which was obviously blown up by the Americans with probably the knowledge of the German government. All of this together. And now the conflict in Iran, I mean, does not put Germany in a very good position economically. Yes, and the gas prices have already risen, I don't know, quite a lot, especially for diesel. Yes.
Like, I think about the dismantling of the European car market, whether it be France, Germany, and all the imports that were coming into, and the Russians loved those vehicles and those markets. They were heavily in using them. And to me, I don't believe sanctions work at all. I think they're a horrible idea. I think if you don't like a government, the worst thing you can do is put sanctions on it. You just guaranteed that it's going to survive forever by putting sanctions on it. The more you put sanctions, the more they'll stay alive.
Well, what Germany basically shot itself in its own foot, because it's a vassal of the United States, and it's not in the interest of Germany to refuse Russian energy, obviously, and buy energy, LNG from the United States, which is, I don't know, a lot more expensive, obviously. Which side did I take in the Civil War reenactment? Well, I took both sides, right? Because I lived in Louisiana, and we did Civil War reenactments on different battlefields like Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana, etc., Georgia. And sometimes I played a Confederate soldier. And most of the people that participated in the reenactments were from the South, and most people actually wanted to play Confederates, but somebody has to play the bad guy. So somebody also, sometimes I also played a Union soldier, right? So both, actually.
Because at the Royal Military College, I definitely was in the old 18 reenactment of wearing the red coats with the muskets ourselves, so with the bayonets. So I played those games as well at the Royal Military College as a red coat.
Yeah, I enjoyed it tremendously.
You guys opened up a can of worms, because we could have an entire podcast about this as far as the blue and the gray, because I was raised in the South, but I was raised by Northerners. So my perspective was, the North were the good guys. And when I would go to festivals in the South and I saw all colors of skin cheering on and enjoying the Confederate flag, I was like just completely confused. And so I understand what you guys are saying, because I've been digging into it a little bit. But I know that there's a lot of Yankees watching. They're like, what are they talking about? So is Israel leadership insane enough to drop nukes on Iran? I think they are. Any other things you guys want to say on that?
I just hope not.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I'm praying that they don't. How's that?
All right. Well, I'm scanning to see if there's anything else that I missed. Here is one. Western companies and institutions expecting oil volatility regularly buy derivatives to hedge costs, but everyone tries to get their hedge protection out at the same time. The market will pop. Yes. What do you think, Philip?
Yes. Yes, I agree. And I think it's very much down to how London handles it, because a lot of these insurance companies are headquartered out of London as well. And I think it really depends on what escalates and how London react, how the UK government react, and how they sort of weigh in on things, and whether they do follow the US and start becoming more of an ally, or whether they sort of hold back a bit. But I think it will. Yeah, I think it'll be an interesting market for sure.
I can only add to that its markets are impossible to predict, and it's recently, I think Donald Trump lifted sanctions temporarily on Russia for oil, as well as even Iran. So that's kind of factors makes it impossible to understand and betting on oil markets, in my opinion. And when the president can temporarily lift sanctions for 30 days against Russia just to let the market cools and has enough inventory, I mean, it's
How much of Israel is authentic religious, or is it a clever front? So, what do you guys think? How
Well, it seems to me
are they
that
true believers or no?
well, it seems to me they are true believers, at least a large percentage of the leadership, just based on the rhetoric and also based on the actions, because a lot of it is quite irrational.
Yeah,
And
difficult to understand.
so I think, yeah, I think it's quite genuine, it seems to me, to a large extent. Of course, also the pragmatists in the government, of course, they're using it as a cover, but I think a lot of them are true believers.
Because Bibi, it sounds like is not a true believer. It's just power games. But I don't know.
Yeah, I think it is a lot about power, and power corrupts religion for sure, and definitely that's a huge factor. You're right.
Do we think Bibi is still walking the earth?
Yeah, I think he's still alive. I don't believe that he's.
Yeah, me too.
There's a lot of propaganda right now, a lot of misinformation.
So, Philip, a question from Luis Philip. How can an American get political refugee status in Russia?
Well, they come here, they surrender their passport, and they raise a case as to why they think they can't go back to their nation. Basically, there's a process. They come here. There's been a lot of cases recently, high-profile cases of people coming here under political asylum from the US. Tara Reid is a prime example of someone that has done that and got citizenship very recently. So, yes, if you think you have got a reason why you can sort of come here under asylum, then Russia will certainly welcome you in.
So, a question here for me, it says, what countries will Israel attack with nukes? Samson directive. Well, I just saw a news flash today that they have hinted, I guess you could say, towards France, Italy, and Germany. I believe those were the three countries that they mentioned in regards to that. So this is what's on their mind. Did you guys hear that or no?
I think Israel would venture to do a false flag attack in the United States before they would do a nuclear attack. I really think they would be motivated to do that first. Or it doesn't necessarily have to significantly only be in the United States, but definitely they would do a false flag attack before they would do nukes.
Interesting. All right, I'm scrolling to see if there's any other questions that I should put on the screen. Why did Trump ask NATO to come to war with him?
Well, I suppose because he realized that he wouldn't be able to do it himself, especially with the whole Strait of Hormuz debacle. I mean, that specifically is a problem that the United States, according to him, when he asked NATO to help, cannot do itself. And that's why he asked other nations to join, and all the other nations refused. And then he said that it doesn't matter. I think it was in the same speech when he actually said if he needs help, and he said, no, we don't need any help. We can do it ourselves. America can do anything. And well, I know he gave the 48-hour ultimatum, yes, which means America cannot do it. Yes.
I think it's to make sure that there is a NATO. I think he's doing it on purpose so that NATO rattles out its kinks and gets it together.
Yeah, but they're not going to do it, I think. And well, Yeah, as we know, like he just gave the ultimatum to Iran, like if you don't open the Strait of Hormuz in the next 48 hours, we'll target all the energy in Iran. So we'll see
Wow.
what will happen
Yeah, I
tomorrow.
guess one question might be, does he need NATO at all physically, or does he just need them for international political support to say, well, look, these X amount of
My
countries are with
understanding
me?
from he does not like working in bilateral or multilateral institutional settings. He's unilateral person.
Did Iran claim the missiles to Diego Garcia? Did you
I
hear
don't know.
about that? If they did or not?
I only heard that there was trajectory of and maybe drones. I don't know, but I know that that was targeted, and I don't think it was successful.
Okay. Yeah, because I believe the story was, wow, they were able to send
But
something so far.
there is strategic targets in an actual World War III. Where Russia starts getting engaged in nuclear conflict, Diego Garcia is going to be, a prime target.
Is there a chance of this war extending to Russia and other Eastern European, I guess, countries? Well, I mean, I guess we would argue that it already is there.
It is, yeah. It is. It's just whether
Yes,
what happens now, and will they start reinforcing each other, and will it become this escalation to this kind of World War III type scenario? Because like I said, it's Russia is at war with Ukraine, so it has its own war to fight. It's just how that intertwines with other wars going on.
Right. Well, guys, I think I'm almost at the end of the questions, but we have over 1,000 eyeballs watching us right now, according to my ticker here. There may be more on other platforms, so think if there's anything very important you want to tell the world before we hang up, and I'll see if there's anything else here.
Well, I would encourage everybody to pray for peace. Actually, that can't be undersold, I think.
Yeah, I concur, and I would say keep up the good work, because your work is invaluable in educating people about what's really going on in different parts of the world that they're not aware of, something that the mainstream often lies about, and people like you uncover. And basically you're telling people the truth, and you're not just telling people the truth, you're showing them the truth by traveling to different parts of Russia and Eastern Europe, and talking to people. And you're revealing what's happening to a large audience. So I really hope your audience will grow and you will continue your work. And again, thank you very much for inviting me. I feel honored to be a part of it.
Me too,
Well,
Joseph.
thanks, Constantine. Yeah, I mean, my hope is to be a mixture of entertainment and information, because I feel like more people will pay attention if I can entertain them. So, not that I don't enjoy entertaining them. So what Constantine's referring to is, in case you guys don't know, I do a lot of street shows, and these are, hopefully very entertaining. I think they are. Because I want people to see that these are real people living in other parts of the world.
Well, I watched the one about Oktoberfest in Moscow yesterday, and I highly recommend it. That's a perfect example of one of your entertaining shows.
Well,
And
thanks, man.
I was gonna say, watching me and Joe eat hamburgers over Moscow is pretty entertaining as well. Yeah, and yeah, like the Oktoberfest one with Lisa, and we've had a few fun collabs, haven't we, Joe, in the past?
Yes. Philip, you were a good sport. You got to be the bad guy in my Oktoberfest video. All right, guys. Well, I've hit the end of the questions, and I appreciate all of you coming on, and Chris Halali as well. And maybe we can do this again in the future. I know that you guys have all been on my show before, and I want to, us to all continue working together, and definitely pray. And it's a terrible time, lots of loss of life, and whoever you are watching this, think about what you can do. And like I said before, sharing is one cheap and easy thing you can do if you like our content. So, all right, gentlemen, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.